Okay. Mitzvah Sarava is a mitzvah of taking the Arava. So Kate said, how is that mitzvah performed? There was a place that was just below Yerushalayim, and it was called Motza. We'll see why it was called Motza. Yardin Lasham, they would go down. It was like a Roman colony, apparently. They went down there. Malaktin Misham Morbios Shalaraba, and they would collect from there large branches of Arava. Uvayim Bazokan Osam Tzidi Mizbech, and they would stand them up on the side of the Mizbech. Tosha says, wait a second, we just had this spirited discussion a couple of blot ago, whether the mitzvah of Arava was standing up the Aravos on the Mizbeach, whether it was handling the Aravos, and we brought like a tiyufta against the opinion that said that it was standing it up against the Mizbeach. So how could we bring such a tiyufta when the Mishnah says it explicitly? There's a short Tosfos here, the Dibla Masla Zokman, he says, well, that was Hainala Achashi Kipu Pamachas. That's after they encircled the Mizbeach one time. The Man Dama, Arava ben Atila, according to the opinion that the way that you perform the mitzvah of Arava is through handling. It means they would handle it. And then after they would handle it, this wasn't really part of the mitzvah. This is just like what they would do as an adornment or an enhancement that they would stand up the Aravas afterwards on the start of the mitzvah. But that wasn't really the mitzvah. Okay, but then Ikar Chosim in a Mishnah, right? But that's what Tosfos explains. Lashan Kipufin al Gabi Mizbeach. And the head of this Arava, since it was 11 amos tall and the Mizbeach was only 10 amos tall, would droop over the top of the Mizbeach. Taco with taco, and then they would do tekios in order to embellish the mitzvah. They would blow a shofar, tekiah, true tekiah. Now, the question is whether this line is a direct continuation of the previous few lines or something else. Every single day they would encircle the Mizbeach Pamachas one time. They would say, the Anas, as they would go around the Mizbeach. Hashem should save us and cause us to be successful. Rabbi Yehuda Aniva Ho Hoshiana. Rabbi Yehuda said what they would say, Aniva Ho Hoshiana, which of course we say at the time of the Hoshanos. And Rashi points out, in case anybody was wondering whether Rashi had any sort of Kabbalah training, apparently he did. So this Rashi points out that in Parshas B'Shalach, there are 3 psukim in a row, V'yasa, V'yavo, and V'yetz, that all have 72 letters, and you get the 72 different versions of the Shem HaMefurish of Hashem by taking the first letter of the first pasuk, followed by the last letter of the next pasuk and the first letter of the third pasuk, and then I guess you keep on going like backwards in the second pasuk and forwards in the first and third pasukim, and you get 72 different sets of Hashem Hashem. And he says that this is a combination. The Vaho is what you get with the first time you do this, and the 37th time that you do this, you get Ani. And for some reason, those are the 2 that you put together, and that's the Ani Vaho, Hoshiana. Okay, and Tosfos also, not to be outdone, also quotes the Rashi, and he says that we have to explain why did we specifically choose these 2 names out of the 72 different combinations. And he quotes on the pasuk in Yechezkel that says that Hashem speaks about himself as being also bezikim, of being in chains, for in the context of a nevuah to Yirmiyahu, kiviyachol hu bi'atzmo, as if he's speaking about himself. That's the ani v'ho, hainu hoshana sheyoshia la'atzmo, that this has the combination of we have to save ourselves and we have to save HaKadosh Baruch Hu as well, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is also in Galus with us, so therefore we're praying for our salvation as well as HaKadosh Baruch Hu's salvation. He should save himself, as it were. But also, and that day, namely the 7th day of Sukkot, which we call Hoshana Rabbah, they would encircle the Mizbeach 7 times. Now, the simple reading of the Mishnah is that they would encircle the Mizbeach with the Arava 7 times. However, the way that it's understood by some of the opinions, and also I think the way it's codified by the Rambam, and the way that's consistent with our own practice, is that no, they would not encircle the Mizbeach ever with the Arava. They encircle the Mizbeach with the lulav. So each day they would encircle 1 time, and on Hoshana Rabbah they would encircle 7 times. What would they say when they finished, encircling the mizbeach, or they finished the mitzvah of the mitzvahs of Sukkot? They would say, Yopi l'cha mizbeach, Yopi l'cha mizbeach. Hey, you mizbeach, you're really beautiful. You're so beautiful, mizbeach. Rabbi Eliezer said they would say, l'cha u'lecha mizbeach. That the mizbeach, l'cha u'lecha mizbeach. For Hashem and for you is the mizbeach. So what does that mean? They're kind of enjoining HaKadosh Baruch Hu with something else, a mizbeach. That doesn't sound very Jewish, but we'll talk about that. K'ma'aseo b'chol, kach ma'aseo b'Shabbos. The same way that it was done during the week, Shabbos as well, they would go around. They would go around to that we said that the lulav was only handled the first day and the Avava was handled the seventh day. So, I guess that if Hoshana Rabbah fell out on the seventh day, they certainly would still carry the Avava if they were encircling the Mizbeach with the Avava. So they would do it the same way on Shabbos. Or maybe even if they didn't have an Avava or a lulav, they would still go around the Mizbeach anyway and say the Hoshanos, and that's in fact our practice. Elashi Malaktin Osan Me'erev. So the Mishnah says that what they would do, at least this must be talking about Hoshana Rabbah, because we said previously that the Arava would be on the would be handled on Shabbos only if the seventh day fell out on Shabbos. They would gather the Aravos the previous day. They would put them in vats of gold. So that they shouldn't wither. In other words, there was water. They would put the vats full of water they were gold vats, and they would place the aravos in the water from the previous day so that the aravos branches wouldn't wither. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka said they didn't bring aravos branches. Like he doesn't. I don't think he denies that there was a mitzvah of arava, but he said that as far as what they would bring. They would, well, this is a question. We'll see in the Gemara, there are two different interpretations, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, whether this was something they did in addition to the Araba on the seventh day of Sukkot, or whether he just held that whatever it is that they would perform the mitzvah with, that were not really Arabos per se, but were actually palm branches. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, they would bring palm branches. That's not willow branches, that's palm branches. And they would beat those branches into the ground. Here's where we get the idea of beating into the ground, except that he wasn't talking about beating into the ground with willow branches, with aravos. He was talking about doing it with palm branches. See, they have mizbeach on the side of this back. And that day, the seventh day of the Sukkot, was called Chibut Karayas. We call it Hoshana Rabbah because we don't actually beat palm branches into the ground, but that's what he said the day was called. Two different ways of interpreting this. The way that Rashi interprets it over here, but he brings the other interpretation as well, which is mashma from the Gemara later on, is that from the hands of the babes, from the hands of the children, they would grab their lulavim, sort of like as fun, and they would eat the esrogim of the children immediately when the mitzvah was completed on the seventh day of Sukkot, which is a question, weren't they muktzah? Could they eat them right away? So Gemara is going to talk about that. And Tosfos in the Dibur Maskeh Miyad Tinoko says, we learned from here that this was not Mishum Gezel, because this was the minhag that was done for Simcha. So we see that when people do very rough and tumbly types of things that are just based on minhag, like they would go around on horses and they would joust, in celebration of weddings at a chasana, and sometimes people's clothing would get torn and so forth. So they would be, you see that from here, that you would be exempt from any damage that was done, since this was the minhag that everybody accepted. So therefore, it's like an implicit mechila that even if a person's clothing or would get damaged in the process, they could get hurt in the process, that there would be no claim that could possibly be made. So that was based, on this understanding of the Gemara, and that there's Rashi later on quotes a medrash that was adapted into a nice modern day story in the Just Imagine series of a fellow who's was giving away tzedakah and gave away his last candlestick or something, and his wife got really angry at him. So he was sort of depressed, and he went to Shul Hoshana Rabbah, I guess it was Hoshana Rabbah, and he followed this Mishnah, this practice, and he grabbed an esrog from a child. And then he was going on a trip. The modern day adaptation is he goes to a plane to India or something, and he goes on a trip, and there's some king of some foreign country who desperately needs an esrog to heal his daughter who's sick, and he gets paid millions of dollars or rubles or whatever for the esrog. So everything turned out, well in the end. So this goes to show that Pshat must be like, this particular interpretation. That means that you grab it from the Tinoko. So the other interpretation, which seems to be more consistent with the simple reading of the Gemara, is miyad, immediately. The Tinokos take their undo their lulavim and they start eating their esrogim. That's always a practice that the children would do, as opposed to taking esrogim from a child, which sounds a little bit like not so nice. But then again, there's an expression: taking candy from a baby. It's not so hard, right? And it's the famous Bullwinkle line: "Have you ever tried to take candy from a baby? It's really hard." Okay, so the Gemara says, "Tana makom kalnia." So there was place was called the Kalnia Haba. That was the place of Motza. Vatani did on my time at Karile Motza. The name was Kalnia, which was a Roman colony. Why was it called Motza? I didn't make it Mikarga the Malka because it was exempt from the tax of the king. They gave it a special exemption. So therefore, Karile Motza. That's why it was called Motza. Motza means it was extracted. It was extracted. It was released from the obligation to pay taxes. So by Motza was open. Osam see they were and they would stand it up on the start of this Satana. Rabos Haruchos Gros. So the Rabos doesn't seem to belong. Rabos would sound like they brought a lot of branches, but we don't really have any kind of source for that or discussion about that. So you can remove that according to the Hagos Marab Manshburg, and just say that Aruchos Gros. They were very, very long and very tall. Achar Amma, they were 11 amos tall. They should go chos on Mizbeach so that they would droop over the Mizbeach Amma for 1 amma. So Amar Rema Mishumar Zutra Shmamina. So Rema said, well, just from an engineering perspective, but we see from here, it must have been that it was placed on the Yesod, because Rashi has a long explanation of how the Mizbeach worked. The Mizbeach went up 1 amma, and that was the Yesod, that was the base, and then went horizontally 1 amma until you got to the rest of the Mizbeach, then went 5 amos up from there, and then there was another indentation of an amma, that's, the Sovate, where the Kohanim would stand, where they would offer the Ketoris and so forth. Then it went up another 3 amos, till you got to the very, very top of the Mizbeach, and then on the 4 sides of the Mizbeach, there were kronos, the little horns, that got it up to 10 amos. So if you simply rested 11 amos against a 10 amos structure, if you're counting the kronos of the Mizbeach, and you have 2 indentations of 1 amma each, it's not really going to droop over the Mizbeach. You might have a tiny little bit that's going to lie over the Mizbeach, but it's not going to droop over the Mizbeach. It's not going to kind of continue to hang over the Mizbeach. So therefore, in order to get this effect where some of the aravos, or the height of the aravos, will droop over the Mizbeach, you had to stand it up on the Yesod, so it would go up 9 amos, and then you had like an additional 2 amos to cover a little bit of the horizontal indentation and have left over in order to continue to droop over the Mizbeach, right? Because the horizontal indentation, you wouldn't have to cover 2, you would only have to cover the 1 that was in the Sovev area, so you'd still have left over a substantial enough amount to droop over the Mizbeach. So Shema Minali Yesod Manach Lo. What? I'm sorry? Motza.
Is that the same community that is just before Yerushalayim, to the west of the city?
That they call Motza? I don't know if it some of the places that name places in Eretz Yisrael are based on previous names, but aren't necessarily proven to be geographically the identical location. So I have a hunch that this might fall into the same category. Like they're estimating that, oh, well, this is kind of like, situated in the same general area based on description in the Mishnah, so we're just going to call it Motza. So I don't know that it was proven archaeologically or geographically. We can look into that. But, like, for example, Bnei Brak nowadays, it's not necessarily exactly where Bnei Brak was originally situated, so it's sometimes there is sort of like rough estimates. We use old names. But it's a good question. Because if it was actually on the ground, if the Allah Amma Khanasama there, you saw Allah Khamesha Khanasama, it would have 2 horizontal indentations at the 1 amma mark in the front and the 6 amma mark. So Sove, Allah Shalosh them Makamakonos until you finally got to the top of the Mizbeach, Gochos Garizbeach, Mishkakoslam. They wouldn't droop over the Mizbeach. It would just kind of like, get to the very top, and then, maybe you'd have a little bit, lying over, a tiny little bit lying over. El Lav Shmamina, the matter must be that the Aravos was stood up on the Yesod. Fine. On the base. Shmamina, that's the proof. Great. I'm Rabbi Abel Maikara. What's the pasuk that teaches us that you would that it was appropriate to sort of bind the aravos to the mizbeach? Shneimar, that they derived it from Isuchag Barosimat Kanos HaMizbeach, that you bind the chag, the holiday, Abosim, one interpretation of what abosim, as Rashi mentions in the second to last line over here, is be'ilados, with trees or tree branches. That's the one, that we find the abosim in as utilized in that particular fashion. Ad konos hamizbeach, up until you get to the horns of the mizbeach, that you would have the branches extend up above the horns of the mizbeach. So I'm Rabbi Yavam, Rabbi Eliezer. Klanota lulav bagudo. So he has a different interpretation of the pasuk that if you take your lulav in its binding, vahadas ba'abo, together with the graded hadassim that are in that are bound together with the lulav, ma'alav alakasav ki ilubana mizbeach. It's considered as if you have actually constructed the mizbeach nowadays. Rikul love korban, and you have brought a korban. Shneimar. How would we see that? Also from this pasuk, we turn the page. Isuchak ba'osim kanos mizbeach. That you bind the chag, the holiday of Sukkot, ba'abosim. Here, ba'abosim is a reference to the braided hadassim. That's anaf eitz abos. Ad kanos mizbeach. So that's considered to be like you are sprinkling the blood on the corners of the mizbeachs. I'm Rabbi Yirmiyah Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon Hamachosi, Mishum Rabbi Yochanan Hamakusi, Kola Ose, and that's not such a familiar name, but okay, it's important to quote everybody's contribution. Kola Ose, Iso L'chag Bachilu Shatia, Ma'alev L'kasav Kilubana Mizbeach. Big people love korban. A different interpretation. If you make an issa, you bind the chag. To connect the chag, and not only to whatever other services you do to celebrate the chag, but also through hearty eating and drinking. So then it's considered as if you have built the altar and you have offered a korban upon the altar. Shenemar, and he derives it from this pasuk, or these two sources derive from this pasuk, based on the fact that it says Isuchag Baosim. You bind the holiday with abosim. Here, abosim can be understood, as Rashi says, as behemos avos ushmenos, very fat and juicy animals, meat that you're going to be eating in celebration of the Chag. Ad kanos mizbeach, and it's considered like you're sprinkling blood on the mizbeach. And Rashi here quotes another interpretation, which we take very much to heart. It's a v'yesh omim in Rashi, in the fourth line of Rashi here. V'yesh omim, that it's not talking about the extra eating and drinking that you do to celebrate the holiday during the holiday, but rather that you're connecting to the holiday through doing this on the day after the holiday. Isru chag, hence the Isru chag ba'abosim. V'yesh omim yom shel achar chag. Yerushalmi calls that parade the moada, son of the chag. And we refer to it as Isru Chag based on this Gemara. Amar Chizkiya, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Kol mitzvahs kulan ein adam yotzei ben l'derech kedei lasan. All the mitzvahs you can only fulfill in the way in which the items grow. So you're going to like put crushim for purposes of being the walls of the Mishkan. So you have to put them in the right way that they grow from the tree. Shenemar atzei shitim omedim. It has to be acacia wood. That is standing up the way that it is cut off of the tree. So Tanya Namihachi, I'd say Shitim Omdim, Shom Derek Day Lawson, that you can't put the bottom part on the top, but rather the top part goes on the top, the bottom part goes on the bottom. And the same thing when you hold the esrog, it has to be that you're holding it, with the top up, and you only turn it upside down. You make the bracha in order not to fulfill the bracha, in order not to fulfill the mitzvah yet. And so to the lulav has to be right side up. Everything has to be right side up when you fulfill the mitzvah. Davar acher. Omdim, Rav Shechta likes to point to this Gemara as a way of showing that all the Torah is connected to each other, because who would otherwise think of connecting the Asay Shitim and the construction of the Mishkan with the fulfillment of the Mitzvah of the Lulav? We see that all the Torah is sort of like one entity, all connected one to each other. Davar Acher Omdim, what else do we derive from the fact that it says Omendim? Shemamindin as Sipuyan, that they're able to hold their plating, because they would be plated with gold. The gold wouldn't cover the entire length of the board, but nonetheless, it would stick on with nails. It would stick on. That's an interpretation that Rashi gives. Shemamidin es tzipuyan, but there's a Rashi elsewhere that says a lashon acher, that it means that it never got worn out, never got moldy or anything that or rusty. That whatever original gold plating was originally placed on the boards, just to stay there without ever getting rusty. Davar acher omdim also has the connotation Shema Tomar, that you might say Avad Sivim Bato Sikuyan, that they are no longer going to be around. and their purpose is no longer ever going to be served again, that we've lost them forever. Talmud Lomer, no, that whatever mitzvah was originally enacted, even if we don't know where the boards are right now, it still serves its purpose. Somehow it serves its purpose in terms of its, a broad metaphysical connection to mitzvahs, and that perhaps this also means that it will once again be uncovered. That it stands and remains forceful and potent forever. Yachol Ani Liftor. So again, we're quoting various statements here from Chizkiah Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. That we started out with a statement where Chizkiah didn't appear. That was on the first line. Only Rabbi Yirmiyah appeared. Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, teaching us about Isu Chag, about eating and drinking either during the holiday or immediately the day after the holiday. So now we're having various other statements that are being made by Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, but in the name of Chizkiah. So Yachal Ani Liftoras Kolom Kulom Min Adin. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai said, I can exempt the entire world from a judgment, Miyom Sheni Vresi Ad Ata, from the day to my own Sechuyos, from the day that it was created until the present time. Ilmali Eliezer Bini Miyom Sheni Vresi, thank you, from the day that I was created until the present time. But we'll get to the day it was created in a moment. Ilmali Eliezer Bini Imi, and if Eliezer, Umali with a yud means if positively. Umali with an aleph means if not. So here we have an if. Umali Eliezer b'ni imi. If Eliezer, my son, remember they were in the cave together, it was with me. Miyam sheniba olam yad akshav. So I'd be able to exempt the world from judgment from the day that the world was created, not just the day I was created, the day the world was created, until the present time. Umali Yosem and Uziyahu imanu. And if Yosem and Uziyahu was with us, he stood in for his father. When his father was a king, he was like a good guy king, we say. But nonetheless, he made a mistake, and that he thought he could do a vote like a coin, so he ended up getting saras. So for 27 years, he had to be sort of exiled to a leper colony. And Yosem took over the kingdom, but he was always extremely respectful of his father, did everything in his father's name, and he was really an exemplar in terms of the mitzvah of kibbud aim, and it was about him that the pasuk in Malachi says, Ben Yechabed Ab. So if Yosem ben Uziyahu, who was the greatest tzaddik of all the kings according to Rashi, Imanu, like you don't think of Yosem so much. You think of the righteous kings. You think of Chizkiah, Yoshio. Like the name of Yosem doesn't come up. But says Rashi, no, he was the biggest tzaddik, right? He was the biggest tzaddik. The tzaddik Kaya. The of Yosem Misham Malachim, biggest tzaddik of all, and the most humble of from more than all the other kings. That's what Rashi says. So if he was with us as well, so we'd be able to exempt the world from judgment. Yom Sheniba Olam, from the day that the world was created, ad sopo, until the end of the world. Does that mean that the world will end at some point? Rashi says ad sopo ad shiachla olam, until the world ends. So it sounds like the world ends at a certain point, which is a little bit of a kasha in the Rambam and Avuchim, separate discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a concept that a person can accept the chatoim of the world upon himself.
Well, that's an interesting interpretation. I wasn't actually interpreting the Gemara that way. I was interpreting it that we have such great sechuyos that we can exempt everybody else from judgment because of our sechuyos. Because the Kodesh Baruch Hu looks at the world and he looks at the total number of sechuyos and the total number of chatoim. Okay. So their sechuyos were so great it could outweigh the chatoim and the rest of the world. That's how I understood it. But I didn't understand it as like Yeshaya and Gimel kind of thing. Chizkiah Rabbi Yirmiyah, and Chizkiah said in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. I saw those who are of the greatest virtue. There aren't so many of them. Elaphain, if there were 1,000 of them, then my son and I, we'd be amongst them. Ani b'nai mehen. If there were 100 of them, ani b'nai mehen. Me and Eliezer, my son, we'd be amongst them. And Shnaimen, if there are only 2, we're the top 2. We're the top 2. Ani b'nai hein. We are the ones. So why is it that he's assuming that there wouldn't be so many? He said, well, if it's 1,000, if it's 100, if it's 2, so we're amongst them, or we are them. But aren't there a lot more of the greatest tzaddikim? There are 18,000 great tzaddikim who stand in front of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. It's based on a pasuk in Yechezkel that has to do with the building of the Beis Hamikdash in the area of Yerushalayim, the third Beis Hamikdash. where the whole thing is cryptic and it needs to be, understood a little bit allegorically anyway. So the Gemara seems to be following that trend. Shenemar Sabib, even though it's talking about the number of Amos that are, in a certain area of Yerushalayim, he's understanding it as not just Amos, but referring to it as the great tzaddikim who stand in front of the Malachei Hashares, and who ask the tzaddikim, what is it that a Kadosh Baruch Hu is teaching? Right? And that's a reference to those who are sitting in front of Hashem. She explained, Shenema Savish Monas or Elef, 18,000. So I can say there's only 1,000 or 102. So Lokasha, had the mistakli bisparkla at the base, Pakalaria mi Hamiira, had the mistakli, had the low mistakli, Pakalaria Hamiira. There are those who are able to see HaKadosh Baruch Hu through clear glass, and there are those who, there's a partition obviously between the tzaddikim and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who are not able to see with clear glass. So the ones who can see with just clear glass without any kind of hindrance would be this very, very small number. The mistaken bispaklaria, but even those who have such direct access to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's like they can see HaKadosh Baruch Hu kiviyachol through clear glass. So how can you say that there would only be like maybe two? We know about the Lamed Bavniks, but this is where it comes from. Abai says that you always have at least 36 Lamed Bavniks at any point in time, at least 36 tzaddikim, the Mekabli Ape Shechina, who are able to be directly right next to the Shechina B'chol Yom, Shenema Ashrei Kol Chochei Lo. Fortunate are those who wait for him. Lamed and Lo has the gematria of 36. Lo, Lamed Vav, the gematria Tlosin of Shisahavo. So Kasha Hai the Aile Bebar, the Aile Below Bar. So he says, well, there's a distinction between the tzaddikim who are able to enter without permission. So those might be only two, and those who require permission in order to be able to enter into the innermost chambers of heaven. So there you can have, 36, but, Rabbi Shimon Yochai was saying, in terms of those who have access whenever they want without any permission, that might be only two, and if it's only two, it would be him and his son. So how can he be like so boastful about how, we're so great that, we would be greater than anybody else that ever lived in the history of the world. There was only two, it would be me and my son. So some of the Bali Musa explained that, no, he wasn't saying that he's like so great. He's saying that we are, if it's only going to be two, then we aspire to be those two. We're going to push ourselves because they really push themselves, to deprive themselves of any kind of, worldly association of pleasure. They just sat in the cave and learned. They said, we're going to push ourselves to be, if it's only two. So we're going to see to it that we push ourselves to be those two. That, that's it's sort of like an attitude of just striving for the greatest excellence in spiritual service. What would they say when they would exit at the Mizbeach at the end of the holiday? So they would say, Yopi, Mizbeach, right? But then they're joining together the name of heaven with something else. They're saying, oh yeah, there's heaven and the Mizbeach. Tanya, we have a Bryce that says you're not allowed to join together Kadosh Baruch Hu with anything else. Is a person who does that is uprooted from the world. Because it says that it has to be just, HaKadosh Baruch Hu by himself. That's why the Rambam says that, when you swear, you can't swear on the name of Hashem and another entity, because it says Ushmoti Shaveh. And I think the Uraim learns that out from Lo Yadacha Elohim Achirim. You can't, worship other gods. It's Mamash Avodah Zarah, could be a nafkamina, whether that issur of swearing in the name of Hashem together with another entity is only a prohibition for Jews or also for non-Jews. In the famous Tosfos at the beginning of Bechoros says that it's only a prohibition for Jews and not for non-Jews. So if you go into a partnership with a non-Jew, who's a Christian, for example, who's going to take a shvuah, and he has in mind God together with, something else, like a Trinity sort of idea. So swearing in the name of like the Trinity would not be a violation for a non-Jew. And then there's a whole question as to whether Tosfos meant that the worshiping of God together with another entity is also not a violation for non-Jews. The user says, no, Tosfos is only talking about swearing. Obviously, if they're going to be worshiping, that's going to be full-fledged Avodah Zarah. That's a big machlokus. The Ramah seems to have held that that's not considered to be a Avodah Zarah for them. So therefore, even though it's a Avodah Zarah for a Jew to worship Christianity, it's not a Avodah Zarah for a non-Jew to worship Christianity. So Haki Karmalei, the Gemara explains, no, there was no joining necessarily of God with the Mizbeach, but rather it was only God. They were saying the Haki Kamar. The ka anachnu modim, we are giving thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. L'chanu mishapchinu, we're giving praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. L'cha anachnu, this is a different word. Mibarachim, we're giving blessing to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. L'chanu mikalsin, and we are giving great glory to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. K'maaseh b'chol. So he said that the same way they would do it during the week, they would do it on Shabbos. So Amar Rav Huna, and then Rabbi Yochanan ben Boka said, well, they didn't bring it wasn't Aravos branches, it was the palm branches. So Amar Rav Huna, my time with Rabbi Yochanan ben Boka. What's the reason Rabbi Yochanan ben Boka? Because this is his actual interpretation of the Gzeira Sakosov, the Ksiv Kapos Shnayim, that it says you take a palm branch, but it's with but it's plural. So because of the fact that it's plural, we read it as kapos, as if as there's above that it's plural. So therefore, that means that there are two types of palm branches that are taken. One is for the mitzvah of lulav, and one is for this separate mitzvah, achas lulav, achas the mizbeach. So when you would encircle the mizbeach, or you would do the chibut, on the floor next to the mizbeach with these palm branches. They say no. If you look at the actual word, the way it's written, there's no vav there. So it's like a yeshem the masoris kind of thing. So it's written without the vav. So it means you just take one lulav for the mitzvah of lulav. But otherwise, for this particular practice, you would take a rubber branches. Rabbi Levi Omer. Rabbi Levi says that the reason Rabbi Yochanan ben Boka is kind of like a savara, meaning that it wasn't that the lulav branches replace the rubber branches for the purpose of smashing on the ground, but rather this was an addition. That's the way that I think is understood by the Meforshim, that Rabbi Levi is saying that since it was a svara, so therefore it was kind of like meant as an addition. That's what I think Tosfos says over here. Yeah. Okay, Rabbi Levi Omer Ketamar, that it was that he was saying that that we're giving like sort of like a simon tov, like a date tree. Ma tamar, just like a date zeh, eno ela lev echad. It only has one heart inside of it. Af Yisrael ein lahem ela lev echad laviim she b'shamayim. So too, the Jewish people only has one heart. Towards our Father in heaven, and Amar Rabbi Yehuda. So therefore, in order to just make this connotation, so he, in addition to the rubber branches, he would also take this palm branch in order to have, as Tosfos says, a siman yafeh. That it would be a siman yafeh for our giving proper praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in order to show our devotion, that we are just like this palm branch, we also only have a leiv echad towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Travaya, you look at the very end of Tosfos, according to Rabbi Levi, this is the Tosfos Achas Lulav, Travaya Hayu, according to this opinion, he had both. Mobiyah Shel Rabba, there were the branches of the willow, Rachoriyos Shel Dekel, and also the branches of the palm tree. Amar Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Lula v'shiva v'sukkah yom echad. So now there's a whole long discussion. How many days do you make the bracha? So Rabbi Yehuda quotes the name of Shmuel. When you make the bracha on lulav for each one of the 7 days, every single time you shake the lulav each one of the 7 days, so sukkah yom echad, and the sukkah was only 1 day. So my time lulav the miski leilas miyam kol yom mitzvah b'apina shehu. The lulav, since you only perform the mitzvah, during the daytime. And not during the nighttime, so every single day is a separate mitzvah. Sukkah is just straight days and nights, so it's all one long continuum. And Rabbi Chana said, Rabbi Yochanan, no, Sukkah 7 days, you make the bracha on lulav 1 day. In other words, exactly the opposite. My timer, what's the reason? Sukkah deraisa, because nowadays Sukkah for 7 days is still mitzvah deraisa. Deraisa shiva 7 days. Lulav drabanan sagili b'chai yoma, but lulav, it's only the Rabbanan after the first day, so therefore one bracha suffices. Rabban said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, we'll make the bracha on both each one of the 7 days. That's our practice. So Rabbi Yosef said, I prefer Rabbi Babachana, who says make the bracha on the sukkah 7 days in lieu of 1 day, because all of the Amoraim agree with him, at least when they're quoting Rabbi Yochanan, that every single version of Rabbi Yochanan is that you make the bracha on the sukkah for 7 days. Okay, there's a version. There's the one who said otherwise was Shmuel, but Rabbi Yochanan. Both versions of Rabbi Yochanan say that you make a bracha on the sukkah 7 days. So at least that we can agree upon. Sukkah. So Meisvei, we have a kasha. Also, when a person makes a lulav for himself, we'll try to speed up. he makes the bracha of Shechianu at that time, because Tosa says a discussion here when you make Shechianu, when you're not. So some mitzvahs we do, some mitzvahs we don't. We don't make a Shechianu when you make a talis to tefillin. So it says any mitzvah that has like special simcha associated with it, you make a Shechianu. Not the lot says when you pick it up in order to fulfill the mitzvah, when it's Sukkot itself. When you're making the lulav, it's the day before Sukkot, Rashi says. But on Sukkot itself, then you say on the morning of Sukkot, you say Baruch Hashem Hashem Tzavas on Tilas Lulav, Rabbi Shpiach Lav Yamishan, Chazma Barak Shiva. According to this Brisa, all says this is why it's a kasha. It indicates that we not just one day, but you make the bracha on the lulav all 7 days. Now, sukkah, and so not like the opinion that says it's only one day. Sukkah liasmo, and if you build a sukkah for yourself, so that's the day before sukkah. When it's sukkah itself and you're sitting down in the sukkah. Omer, that's when you say Asheket Hashem Tzav Tzivanu Leishe B'Sukkah. Karen Sheberach Yamishan Shuveina Mevarach. So it's exactly the opposite way around. It says that you only make the bracha on the sukkah the first day. Sakash Lulav, Kasha Sukkah. Sakash in both directions. We had said the opposite, that on the sukkah you only make the bracha for you make the bracha all 7 days, and on the lulav you only make it the first day. So bishlam lulav lo kasha. You say the lulav is not a kasha. Kam bisman shebeis hamikdash kayem. That you would make the bracha for the lulav every single day, when every single day would be a deraisa, at least in the base of mikdash. When you make the bracha on the lulav only one day, which is have one version of Rabbi Yochanan Paskin, that's talking about when the base of mikdash is not around anymore, where the mitzvah deraisa is only the first day. Ela sukkah kasha. The sukkah is always deraisa. So how do you explain the discrepancy with respect to the sukkah? Because here it indicates that you only make the bracha the first day. So say Tanai is machlokas Tanaim. The Tanya tefillin kozman sheminichem mevarka lein to be Rebbe. Rebbe says that whenever you put on tefillin, you always make a bracha. Tefillin is the right. So tefillin, we say despite the fact that it continues all day. So within the same day, despite the fact that it's a continuum within the day, every time you take it off and then you put it back on, you make a new bracha. That's what Rebbe says. So Chachamim will say that no, if I have a continuum, I only make the bracha once, even though I may take it off and then put it back on again only 2 hours later. So when we say that the sukkah you make the bracha every single day, it's like the opinion of Rebbe that every single time you put on tefillin, you make a new bracha. Abaye says the halakha is like Rebbe. Rabbanan. And the Chachamim say that the halacha is like, and Rava says the halacha is like the Chachamim, that you would only make the bracha on tefillin once. So Amar Mari brought about Shmuel, Mari, who was the son of Bas Shmuel, Chazina, lay the Rava, the Lo Abi Geshmaite. He saw that even though normally when Rava and Abaye argue, we always hold like Rava didn't hold by himself. Benafik, he would go to the bathroom, and Benafik, he would come out, Mashiach, they wash his hands, and Manach put on the tefillin Mevarich, make the bracha, and whenever he would need to go again to the bathroom and come back, you make a new bracha, even on the same day. I'll basically say Benafik, Mashiach, they wash his hands, and Manach tefillin Mevarich, and make a new bracha on the tefillin. But not make your Rabbi Abdin, and therefore, since Rav in the end really ended up holding like a Abaye too, so we hold like that opinion, which is like Rabbi against the Chachamim, Mevarich and Koshiva, and therefore, since we make a separate bracha on tefillin every time we put it on even within the same day, we also make a bracha on the sukkah every single new time that we go into the sukkah. If a person, technically speaking, we hold like the Magen Avraham, who says if a person theoretically would stay in the sukkah all 7 days straight and would never leave at all, and only leave for like a 2-minute bathroom break and come right back, so he would only make one bracha of the entire sukkah. But generally leave. Generally speaking, people leave for longer periods of time. And so therefore, when they come back every single time that they were sitting down for like a new session of eating, you make a new bracha. I saw a puppy every time he put on tefillin, he made a new bracha. The Chachamim in the base Medrash Ravashi, every time that they would just handle the tefillin, it's a mitzvah like the tzitz, supposed to handle the tefillin, and it's kind of like to remind yourself you're wearing the tefillin, they make a new bracha each time. So Amar Vida Amashmuel mitzvahs lulav kol shiva. We just said in the name of Shmuel, the mitzvah of lulav is all 7 days. So Shimon Levi Amar, meaning that you make a bracha all 7 days. Let's get back to the lulav. What's the bottom line with respect to the lulav? Rabbi Shua ben Levi Amar Yom Rishon. Rishon and Levi said no, only the first day. Mitzvah lulav, Yom Rishon mitzvah lulav. The first day, that's the mitzvah of lulav. Mikam ve'elach mitzvah sekenim. And afterwards, it's only a din d'Rabbanan. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai instituted that after the destruction of the base of Mikdash, we take the lulav still for 7 days. So you don't make a bracha after the first day. Rabbi Yitzchak Amar Kol Yom mitzvah sekenim. Yom Rishon. Rabbi Yitzchak said every single day is considered to be the enactment of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, even the first day. What do you mean by that? The first day is deraisa. So Ema, no, he meant Bami Yomish, except for the first day. Rabbi Shimon Levi. Then he's saying the same thing as Rabbi Shimon Levi. Ema, yeah, you're right. It means then he also said the same thing. Rab also had that all 7 days you make the bracha. Just like you make a, but even though it's a mitzvah drabanan after the first day, we make a bracha on mitzvah drabanan, just like we make a bracha on lighting the candle of Hanukkah, which is a mitzvah drabanan. Like Rav says, we infer it from the fact that Rav says you make a bracha for lighting the candles of Hanukkah every day. Even if you just see the candle of Hanukkah, then you make the bracha. What bracha do you make? You can't say the hadlik because you're not lighting it, so you say shas and isim. The first day, the person who's lighting it makes 3 brachos. And the one who sees the candles can't light it, so he makes 2 brachos. He doesn't have a house, whatever, so he makes 2 brachos, shas and isim, and the shechianu. In the subsequent days, the person who is malik doesn't make the shechianu, makes the other 2 brachos, and the Lord just says shas and isim. What's the bracha? So we didn't say what the bracha is. I said what the bracha is, but the Gemara wants a chance to. But where were we commanded? So it says you have to follow what the Chachamim tell you. It says on the pasuk, you follow what your elders tell you. So it's a mitzvah. The Torah says it's a mitzvah. You got to do the drabanan. What the drabanan tell you to do, so you can still say a bracha. So Yitzchak, so therefore you can make a bracha on the last 6 days of Sukkot as well on the lulav. We're not going to Yitzchak but not going to Yitzchak has it explicitly, not just that he's inferring from Hanukkah, but that Rav said this explicitly with respect to the lulav. Amarak Shimon mitzvahs lulav. All 7 days make the bracha on the lulav. Tana Rabbanan. So we have a price that says make your so when you build the sukkah shake shechianu. Nekas leiship you go to sit on the sukkah on the first night. If it was already standing, so how can you make the shechianu when you're making it when it was already made? So then, if before Sukkot you can like shake the schach a little bit and add something of your own, you make the bracha of shechianu. And if not, when you go to sit there the first night, you make both brachas shechianu and leishib sukkah. That's what we do. So Ashi says, I saw Rav Kahana made all the brachas over the coast of Kiddush, and that's what we do. The kamal kulu akasa kiddush. He made all the brachas shechianu leishib on the Kiddush. Whenever a person has lots of mitzvahs in front of them, they have to like take the lulav and sit in the sukkah and put on tefillin and wear tzitzis, so you could be efficient. Only just make one big bracha. All mitzvahs, one big bracha on all the mitzvahs together. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, no, you can't do that. You got to make a separate bracha on each mitzvah. As we all know, the halachas like Rabbi Yehuda, we make a separate bracha on each mitzvah. It's reason every day on everything you make a bracha. We only give brachas to Hashem in the day and not the night. No. It means every single day, give the right brachos that are applicable to that day. If there are 5 mitzvahs, make brachos on all 5 mitzvahs. So it means like, if it's a day of Sukkot, you make Sukkot-oriented brachos, Hanukkah-oriented brachos, and whatever the day happens to bring, whatever you're doing that day, you make separate bracha on each of the mitzvahs. You see that a Akash Baruch is not like a kingly, it's not like an earthly king. Midas Basav Adam Kli Rekan Machazik, or actually we're not talking about kings, like any person. So a regular person, Midas Basav Adam Kli Rekan Machazik, Mole Eno Machazik. You can put something in an empty vessel, but not in a full vessel. Midas Akash Baruch, when it comes to Akash Baruch, Mole Machazik Rekan Eno Machazik. Eno Machazik, that it's only something which is full you can add to, but if it's empty, you can't add to it. What in the world are we talking about? Shenema, we're talking about Torah. You want to understand the Torah of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, to understand the essence, to connect with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So if you listen when you're young, so you're able to add to it. But if you don't have a basis, you don't have a foundation, you're not going to be able to build on your Torah. And the other interpretation is if you chazer, you go over what you have learned previously, so then you'll be able to build on it and you'll be able to have Torah. But if you're not going to chazer, you're not going to go over that which you've learned, so then you're not going to be able to be maksik, you're not going to be able to add anything to it because you need to have that foundation. So therefore, we have to pay close attention and we have to chazer. What does that mean? Are you allowed to eat the esrog on the 7th day? He says, no. 7th day was hooked to mitzvah. This meant for the mitzvah. You should eat it on the 8th day. Shmini Atzeret is fine. Sukkah, sukkah, you want to use the wood of the sukkah for firewood, so you're not even allowed to do that on the 8th day, despite the fact that the 8th day is already Shmini Atzeres. So we're talking about Eretz Yisrael here. Reish Lakish says, no, the 7th day also you can eat your esrog after you fulfill the mitzvah. Mike and Palgi, what are they arguing about? The opinion of Reish Lakish is only set aside for the mitzvah. The other opinion says, no, it's set aside for the mitzvah that day, so therefore you have to wait till the end of the day. So Reish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish asked the Kashi. He said that you can eat it right away. What about the Mishnah? The Mishnah sounds like so my life would in the Gedolim. So does it not only apply to the esrogim that belong to the Gedolim as well? You could say that even if the pshat is not that the Tinokas are eating it themselves, but the Gedolim are taking it from the Tinokas, it means they can only eat the esrogim that belongs to the Tinokas, but not their own esrogim. So, but that doesn't make sense because an esrog is an esrog. So doesn't this imply that even if it would be their own esrogim, they could eat it? Meaning even though it's still the 7th day, so say, well, Tinokas tafka. No, only the esrogim and the Tinokas can eat it. Another version of the discussion. Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan asked the Kasha Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan held that you can't eat the esrog the entire day. It sounds like it's only applicable there. So he's medayek that says dafka tinokas and not gedolim. So we say no. Reish Lakish can answer who did not feel gedolim. Either tiny tinokas or chadimilsa katani. So that's what it generally is. It's talking about that it's an chadimilsa that it's not normal. Especially if we learn shat that you grab the esrog in front of us, you're going to grab an esrog from a baby, but it's much harder, presumably, to grab an esrog from a grown man. He'll fight back more. So I'm going to Papa Abaye. So Papa said to Abaye, Rabbi Yochanan, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that you can't eat it until the end of the day. Ma'ishna sukkah, ma'ishna esrog. Why is it that the mitzvah of lulav is 7 days, and the mitzvah and the esrog is 7 days, and the mitzvah of sukkah is 7 days? Why, when it comes to sukkah, do we say the 8th day is also us? So Amalei Sukkah the Chaz of Ben Hashmashos. Sukkah, when you get to this Ben Hashmashos at the end of Hoshana Rabbah, before you get to Shmini Atzeres, if you would eat a meal, it would have to be in the Sukkah. So since you would have to eat there on the Ben Hashmashos of the 7 days, the Ben Hashmashos causes the rest of the day, including the entire 8th day, to become muktzah as well. It's kasai the ben hashmashos. So we do this kasai the ben hashmashos. It's kasai the kuliyoma. Once you can't use it during the ben hashmashos, you can't use it the entire day. You can't use any of the wood of the sukkah. Not allowed to do stira. Not allowed to take it down anyway. But let's say it would fall down on its own, you still couldn't use it. Let's say it had already fallen down. The shmini, the kuliyoma and the shmini. Period. Esrog lo chazi ben hashmashos. Esrog, however, which you already fulfilled one time. You pick up the lulav and esrog in the morning, you already fulfill the mitzvah, you're not going to fulfill it again, ben hashmashos. Lo is kasai the ben hashmashos, therefore it is not set aside for the mitzvah ben hashmashos of Hoshana Rabbah going into Shmini Atzeres. Lo is kasai the kuliyama, and therefore it's not us for the rest of the 8th day, the Shmini. But Levi Amar esrog afilu b'Shmini aser. Levi says, and even the esrog is also on the 8th day. So he's like really, really machmir because he also I make a hekesh between sukkah and esrog. I shouldn't get mixed up between the two. And the father of Shmuel said, no. It's only the 7th day, like Rabbi Yochanan said, the 8th day would be okay. So come Abu the Shmuel, we should say Levi, and then Abu the Shmuel decided he's going to be machmir like Levi, and come Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera came along and he said, you know what, I'm going to be Mako. We should say Abu the Shmuel. Dam Rabbi Zera, because we see Rabbi Zera said it's only the 7th day. Esrog Shenifsla. In esrog, even an esrog that's possible, essentially was you set aside for the mitzvah originally for the entire 7 days. So therefore, even if it becomes possible after the first day, you still can't eat it until the end of the 7th day. But only 7 days, the 8th day would be okay. I'm going to say, you shouldn't give, before you fulfill the mitzvah of lulav, you shouldn't give your lulav to a child under bar mitzvah for him to fulfill the mitzvah, because he could be kohen. Might tell him, he could be kohen, but he can't give it back to you. He's not able to transfer possession of it to you, so therefore you won't have ownership of the lulav and esrog to fulfill the mitzvah on the first day when it needs to belong to you. Nishtaka, can we have this issue with up until the age of 13? If he's a minor, Okay, if he's saying we have this issue with respect to Yom Tov Sheni Shagalias, even after you fulfill the mitzvah on the first day, you shouldn't give your lulav and esrog to a child beneath the age of bar mitzvah because you won't be able to get it back the second day when we hold that the second day needs to belong to you as well. Then you're fulfilling the mitzvah where the lulav doesn't belong to you, which does not work on the first day or in Golos on the second day either. While on the subject of how you go about, doing transactions with a child, don't say to a child, I'm going to give you something and then not give it to him. Okay, we're going to go to the park this afternoon, Shabbos afternoon, then you fall asleep. You can't do that. Because then the child will learn that it's okay to lie. That's why, they talk about that you shouldn't take away things from a child in a classroom, because then they'll learn that it's okay to steal possessions, and you shouldn't ask one child about what another child did because then they're going to learn to be malshin, there'll be a deletoria, They talk about, the poskim talk about this. Shenema limdu l'shonam devar sheker, because it says that you're going to teach a person how to act deceitfully. That's the wrong thing to do. So this whole discussion of Rabbi Yochanan and this machlokas Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Shimon Lakish, whether the yesod is muktzah the entire 7th day or not, is we find the same machlokas as follows. The Idmar. Let's say you set aside one esrog for each of the 7 days, not one esrog for 7 days, one esrog the first day, one esrog the second day, and so forth. So Rav says, so Rav says that you could be yotze each one and just eat it immediately afterwards, like Reish Lakish. So he changed around the gear. So most changed around the gear. The gear over here, the altar, where he says you can eat it right away, and they say no, that's not what Rav said. Rav said we were going to assume Hosak Rabbi Yochanan to change the word from the altar to Lamachal. Rav says you can eat it the next day. Mabasi says and each one you can eat the next day. Change around the girsa again and change the makar to the altar. He held like Reish Lakish, you can eat it right away. What are they arguing about? No, one opinion holds that it was set aside for the mitzvah, the mitzvah alone, therefore you can eat it immediately afterwards. The opinion says no, it's once set aside for the mitzvah, it's set aside for the entire day, like Rabbi Yochanan. But in this land, Trey Yomi, and according to us, now finally we're talking about the Bnei Chutz La'aretz. We have 2 days that we celebrate Yom Tov. Hechev Din, what do? So Shmini Savek Shvi Aser. The esrog is also not only the 7th day, but it's also the 8th day, because the 8th day is a suffix, then maybe it's really the 7th day. She Savek Shmini Mutter, but on the 9th day, Simchas Torah, already you can eat the esrog. So Rema Afilu Shmini Savek Shvi Mutter. Rema is very makel. He says no, even on the 8th day, it's going to be Mutter already. And Besura of the Kimer, and in Surah they followed Merema's lenient opinion, or Sheshi Brei Rabidi Avika Baye. But Sheshi Brei Rabidi followed Abaye's strict opinion, because Abaye and the opinions like and the halakha is like Abaye's strict opinion. So I'm Yehuda Brei Rashon Barshelas Mishmei Rav Shmini Savek Shvi L'Sukkah Shmini Lavacha. So Shmuel Barshelas said in the name of Rav that Shmini, which is a suffix, meaning a Shmini Atzeres, well, we treat that, maybe it's really the 7th day of Sukkot. So therefore, it's considered to be like the 7th day of Sukkah, a 7th day for purposes of eating in the Sukkah, and the 8th day for purposes of bracha. What does that mean? We'll see. Rabbi Yochanan says no, we treat it like the 8th day for both purposes. So basically, I'm going to look at the Yasminim. Everybody agrees you do sit in the sukkah. That's going to be our conclusion, which we're not going to necessarily get to. But everyone agrees that you sit in the sukkah on the 8th day on Shmini Atzeres. No question about that, right? Kipligi, we're talking about in Chutz La'aretz, of course. Kipligi the Baruche. They're arguing about whether or not you make a bracha. According to the first opinion, which was Mishmei the Rav. So he said Shvi L'Sukkah. That means that you would also make a bracha. But according to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, who said Shmini Lazeh, he didn't mean you don't sit in the sukkah. No, you sit in the sukkah, but it meant you don't make the bracha. So I'm Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yochanan you should follow Rabbi Yochanan, because the Hunim Babisna and all the Gedolei Yador, they went into the sukkah where on Shmini Atzeres, and Meisev Avayasvi, they would sit there on Shmini Atzeres, right? But they wouldn't, make the bracha on Shmini Atzeres. Okay, we'll try to get to the end of this. Okay, but Dilma, so maybe they were just of the opinion that since they already made a bracha on the sukkah on the first day, they don't have to make any other bracha. We can't infer from this. So Gemara say no, that there was a tradition that this case was they had not sat in the sukkah the entire yontiv. They had been out in the fields in the April also. This was the first time that they were sitting in the sukkah. It happened to be on Shmini Atzeres, and nonetheless, even though it was the first time, they still didn't make the brachas. There is another opinion. We reject this. This is not the opinion that we follow. But there is another opinion that says, everybody agrees, you don't make a bracha, that for sure. What they're arguing about is whether you sit. According to the opinion that it is 7 days of l'sukkah, that means that you would sit even though you don't make a bracha. The opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, that you also don't sit in the sukkah. But I'm Rabbi Yochanan that you should follow Rabbi Yochanan, the Mara Dishpaiti money, Rabbi Yehuda Breder or Shmuel Bar Shelas, because of the one who made the statement according to Rab, that would indicate that you would sit in the sukkah was Rabbi Yehuda Breder or Shmuel Bar Shelas, or Shmini Savek Shmini Levavi Sukkah Yasa, but he himself sat outside of the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres. But nonetheless, the Hilchasa bottom line is, like the first version of Rabbi Yochanan, the Hilchasa Meisav Yasminim, we sit in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres, Brukei Lamavakinim, but we don't make the bracha.
Wow.
Okay. See you.